Hey guys, welcome back to this lecture, writing your first configuration file. So in this lecture, we will learn few important things about YAML file format. As you know, Prometheus accepts all the configuration in the YAML format. So these things are important to know before actually starting writing the configuration file. So we will start at the very first. We should know YAML is a case sensitive. So any word you are defining in the lowercase should be used in the lowercase only in the other places if you are referring the same. If you are changing the case, then it would mean a different word. Okay, the next thing is file should have a YAML YAML or .yaml YML extension. So why we are saying this? Both the extensions refers to the same YAML file format, but somewhere some people use .yaml and the other people use .yml. So YML was basically one of the Windows extension. In Windows, people used to refer it like this, but both are same. You can use any. Now, third is YAML does not allows the use of tabs. Spaces are allowed instead. As we know, YAML strictly follows the indentation, so we need to keep that in mind. We cannot use the tab. We can only use the spaces. Okay. Now the next is hyphen plus space is used to specify a new item in the list. So now suppose if you have any list and you want to specify or add any new item inside the list, so that will always start with hyphen and space. As you can see in the example, rules file is a list here. Inside this we have two items. First is first rules.yaml, and it is starting with hyphen and then space, and the same is for the second one, the second underscore rules.yaml, which is again starting with hyphen and space. Okay, the next is inline format is specified using comma and space. Now suppose in the list you want to specify multiple items in the same line, then you can use the comma and space in between. As you are seeing here in the targets, which is a list, you can use localhost colon 1990 closing the square double quotes here, then comma, space, and then again the second item. Okay, next is comments in YAML begins with the hash character. Whenever you specify a comment in the YAML file, you will start it with the hash character, so that will not be actually considered as an command or as in the YAML file configurations. Okay, so you will start it with the hash for the comments. So this was about the YAML file format and how do we write the file or the configuration in YAML. So these are basic few important things which you should know. Now we will quickly jump onto the demo where we will create a first configuration file. Okay, so now it's time we start writing our first configuration file. So please remember, the file name could be anything. It doesn't matter whether it is prometheus.yaml or test.yaml. It can be anything. The thing that matters is the content inside your file. Okay, and the extension, because it is a YAML file. Although in Linux there is no meaning of extension. Every file is a regular file, so you can use without extension as well. So we will create a test file here. Okay, test.yaml, and we are considering it as our Prometheus YAML file. Okay, so we are inside this file. Now we'll start writing our configuration. Okay, the very first thing, whenever you write any configuration, you should always include the comments before every section or before every configuration which you want others to understand easily. Okay, now as I am starting this configuration file, I'll add a comment here saying Prometheus configuration file. Okay, so as you know, every comment should start with hash character. Okay, now here my actual configuration starts. The very first section, as we have seen in the last lecture, was the global. So what we have learned earlier, in global section we specify those configurations which are global in nature, okay, which are not specific to any particular job. So whatever jobs or scraping targets we will define afterwards, for all those scraping targets, these configurations inside the global will be applied. So the very first thing we are using is scrape interval. By default it is 15 seconds for Prometheus. You can modify it saying, let's say 20 seconds based upon your requirement. The next is valuation interval. Valuation interval is by default 15 seconds. You can make it anything you want. Okay, and the next is scrap timeout. So scrap timeout is 10 seconds by default, and you can have it your way as per your requirement. So these three parameters I've defined inside this global section. So scrap interval is nothing but the interval at which every target is scrapped. Evaluation interval is if you have any expression in your recording rules or anything, then that evaluation occurs at every 15 seconds. A scrap timeout is nothing but the timeout after which your scrapping will show an error. Now suppose your scrapping target does not works fine in 10 seconds, then it will time out and you'll get the exception. Okay, so this was about the global. There are others as well. Throughout the course we will see other attributes and other parameters which we include in our configuration. Okay, the next, till now we do not have alert manager setup, but I'll show you what is the syntax for that. Okay, and when we'll actually starting working on alert manager, then you'll be able to relate it. Okay, I'll add a comment here and I'll see alert manager section or alert manager configuration. Okay, now here I'll specify the very section name, alerting. Okay, inside alerting I've given it a name, alert managers, and inside alert manager I have static underscore configs. Now if you see it, we are strictly following the indentation here. So every new line inside the global is having two spaces in the front, and same is for this alerting. And then after alerting, alert managers has two spaces in the front, and then because static configs is part of alert managers, then static configs hyphen is having two spaces in the front. Okay, so every child will have the same number of spaces as that of we want. Now let's say I'm saying in the first global section I've used two spaces format, right, two spaces indentation, and in the next I'm changing it to something, let's say I'm inserting three spaces in front of alert managers. It will fail. Your YAML file syntax will not be okay, so your configuration will fail here. So you need to take care of that. Now we have static configs. In static configs we have targets. So it strictly follows the parent-child behavior. So you can see it here in static configs. In static configs we have targets, and inside the targets we actually need to specify the endpoint at which our alert manager is set up. So currently we do not have any endpoint, so I'll comment it out. Let's say my endpoint is alert manager and then whatever port, let's say 9100, any example code. Okay, now as we do not have this alert manager in our ecosystem right now, so we'll comment it. Okay, now the next thing is, if you have any rule file, let's say alert rule file or alert rules or recording rules, then you can specify them inside rule files here. Okay, here as I press enter, it has already inserted two spaces in the front, and then it started. In the rule files I have my first rule files. Let's say I can give it an example of alert rules .yaml. Okay, maybe next I can have recording rules .yaml. So this is how you can specify the rule files. Now let's say next we have, suppose you want to scrap a particular EC2 machine for the node metrics, then you can specify the targets now in the scrap config. Okay, so here we specify the targets for which we want to scrap the metric. So I will say scrap configs. Inside it I will create a job Now job is nothing but the combination of similar targets. Okay, so it's on you how you create the jobs. So this is totally for you. How do you want to segregate the targets? So here in the script configs, I'll create a job name. Let's say node, and inside that I will have, now there are multiple attributes related to scrap configs, and few are like metric path. So at which particular subpath you want to scrap the metric from, so we need to specify the path of that. Now let's say localhost colon 9090 and the subpath is slash metrics, then slash metrics is the metric path at which my metrics are available, okay, or exposed. Other we have scheme, like we want HTTP communication or HTTPS communication with the target, so we can specify it here. Scheme, let's say HTTPS. Now metric path should be metrics path slash metrics. Let's say by default it picks the slash metrics. So if you do not specify it, then it's also fine. Next I have static configs. Now what is static configs? As we already learned in the initial lectures, there are two kind of configs. One is static, one is service discovery that we use, or dynamic, which gets created at the runtime. Static configs you can use where you know the target and you can specify its endpoint. Okay, so here in the static configs I will specify the target. Now because it's a new item in the static config list, so it will start with hyphen and then space. And now because it's a child of static config, so before hyphen it is having two spaces, indentation, as per indentation. Okay, now targets is a list again. So in the list, now we need the endpoint at which metrics are exposed. So in my case, this is the only instance that we have. Okay, and the Prometheus is installed in it. So what I can do, I can use localhost 9090. So what will happen here, it will monitor the Prometheus server itself at 9090. Okay, so it will show me the Prometheus related metrics. Okay, so this was about this configuration file. We have written the configuration file. This is very basic typical configuration file. As we move forward, we will learn a lot of things which we will accommodate throughout the course. Okay, well, so now it's time to validate our configuration file. So we have written this test.yml file. We will attach it to a container, Prometheus container, and we will see whether this is correct or not, or whether Prometheus is coming up with this configuration file or not. So we will create a new container from this configuration file. Let us use docker run, and in our last command, what we will do, we will modify the source path, that is the host path of Prometheus YAML.file with the new path mnt, and we have test.yml. Okay, now this rest will be same because inside the container we have not changed anything. We have just created the configuration file inside in my EC2 instance where the container volume will be mounted. Okay, so this test.yml will override the prometheus.yml file inside the container. Okay, so I'll hit the enter here. Okay, I can see the container is up now. It is listening on 9090 port. Okay, so I'll clean it up. I'll see the Docker container 9090. Now we will try to access this Prometheus on 9090 port, and we'll see whether it is taking the new configuration file or not. Okay, so okay, it is loading fine. Now let us go to configuration. Here I can see, okay, okay, here you can see the job name as node. So this is the configuration file which we have specified from test.yml. Okay, because we have given the job name there as node. And now it's time to check whether we have the targets healthy or not. Okay, now we see the red mark here, and we are saying HTTP server gave HTTP response to HTTPS client. Okay, there is some issue with my target. And what is the issue? If you notice, it is using HTTPS localhost 9090 matrix. What does that mean? The scheme it is using to scrap the target is HTTPS. Let us check the configuration again. And if you remember, when we have written the scrap config, the scheme we have specified was HTTPS. That is the reason it is not able to communicate to the target, because we do not have any HTTPS communication setup on this. So what we will do, we will modify the test.yaml file with HTTP scheme. Okay, and now I will restart my container. Okay, now let us see. Okay, my scheme has changed to HTTP now. Now let us check the target health. Okay, it is unknown currently. Let it come up. Okay, great. It is up now. So that means we have resolved that issue. So this is one of the issue which usually comes when people mistakenly specify the HTTPS in place of HTTP. So you'll not be able to scrape the target. Now the another way to resolve this issue is actually implementing the TLS at your endpoint, so that you can communicate with the targets over the HTTPS. So that we will learn in the upcoming lectures. Okay, so this was about the configuration. Now I would like to show you one more thing here. As we have said, there is no issue if we do not give the extension as well with the YAML file. Now currently my configuration name is test.yaml. What I'll do, first of all, let me remove that container which is already using this configuration file, and I will create a new container on the same port. Okay, now what I'll do, I will rename this file to test only. So I'm removing the extension from the file. So as I said, in Linux every file is a regular file, so it doesn't actually matters which extension or what you are giving. It is just for the human readable capability. Okay, so now we have changed it to test. Now we will run a container with this test file only. Okay, so let's see whether it takes up the configuration or not. Okay, in test.yaml I will change it to test and again run it. Okay, again my Prometheus started fine, and now let's try to access it over the console or in the browser. Okay, it is up, it is loading. Let us see if it is changing to green. Okay, so it is up now. So you can see target is healthy. It has taken the configuration. If you still want to check the actual configuration file path which it is using, what you can do, it is showing your configuration file path inside the container, because our test file is overriding the Prometheus file inside the container. So container knows this file. Okay, so this was about the configuration file. Now I hope you will be, or you were able to understand the configuration file and how to write it and how to validate it. Okay, so thank you so much. I'll see you in the next lecture.